Well, hello everyone. Um, I am coming to you from a relative's garage. Um, I, it's not the ideal. I notice there's like a bright light. I'm gonna try to spin this a little bit so maybe that doesn't give you a migraine headache from staring at the bright spot where that light is over their washer and dryer. But yeah, I am broadcasting from their garage. Um, it's one of the few places where there aren't people sleeping still, um, and where I won't wake them. Plus, I think it's the only true desk type service they have. They don't have a table and chairs even in their dining room. Of course, there are kids sleeping on air mattresses on the floor anyway in the next room. So I'm in the garage today. So pardon the surroundings, the environment. But I don't guess that matters too much. It's just, I think it's kind of funny. But anyway, let me give you our text. Our text today is Matthew 18, verse 18. While you're turning there, let me just give you an update on Kylie. She's doing great. Stitches were out this last Wednesday. She's still got restrictions, things she can't do, things she needs help with. She is able to drive now. As of Wednesday, the day she got her stitches out, she can start driving now. She feels like she walks when she's walking. She doesn't really notice. She feels like she walks normal. It's just every once in a while she gets some weird pain when she's not expecting it, for no real reason. I think it's just probably that bone still healing up. She still can't lift anything, so she's still got limitations, but she's doing well. Continue to pray for friends that he died back in May, and this is down in Florida. His wife and 3 kids are still, just going through things. They're just having a hard time with it, obviously. I think the oldest kid I think she's going into her sophomore year in high school, and the youngest would be like, late elementary school. So that's the uh, um, Michelle, and that would be the mom and our 3 kids. So just remember them. And also keep in prayer my cousin and his in-laws, because for whatever crazy reason, the 15-year-old grandson killed the grandfather, with a gun. So pray for that family. I don't even know what's going on there, but just pray for everybody. But other than that, everything's going fine. We've been, taking advantage of Kylie's surgery. Since we're going to be with her, we might as well go ahead and get some vacationing done. So Mama Scott, my mom, that's what my kids call her, Mama Scott, has done a great deal of taking care of Kylie as we, went and did some other things to try to see a little other family, do some vacationing. But I'm back Wednesday. Sister Scott, she'll be gone a little longer. Kylie will be gone longer too, obviously. But I'll be back Wednesday. And so we'll have regular service next week. And yeah, by the way, off the top of my head, what is that date? I'm gonna double check that. Yeah, it'll be the third. The third. Okay. All right. So let's read our text right now. Matthew 18, verse 18 says, "Verily I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." All right, let's go to the Lord in prayer and ask him to take care of our families and our needs and our travel, and our country, and also to bless the sermon. God, we love you this morning. We ask you right now to put your hand on Kylie and help her to continue to heal. Put your hand on us as we travel. Put your hand on Sister Elaine and Sister Teresa's families. Help them to be okay and healthy and strong with no issues, no problems. God, put your hand on Jordan. He seems to be loving his job. Continue, God, to help him with that. Put your hand on Emma. Help her, God, to continue to get stronger and recover, God, from the recent, situation with their relationship, and continue to bless her in her new job, God. That's a real exciting career potentially there. We ask you, Lord, to put your hand on Sister Patty. Keep her strong. Betrayal Sister Rianne, help her to find her next step and the next thing in life. She's feeling the restlessness of needing to move on and find something and find a larger social group, God. And we just ask you to, open up some doors for her. We ask you to put your hand on Sister Barb's son as he tries to make himself in his family's place here in the county again. And also put your hand on her mother-in-law, God, in her advanced years down in Massachusetts. Bless the sermon in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, my title today is Knitting in Preparation for Night. Knitting, as in, the two little knitting needles in the yarn. Yeah, knitting in preparation for night. And that doesn't seem to have anything to do with our verse at all, but it actually does. While I've been away, I have taken advantage of the digital connectivity and listened to some preaching. Some of it's been from ministers I had not heard before. Some of it's been from ministers that I'm very familiar with, and a couple that I sat underneath them at different times in my past. And heard some good stuff. I had never listened to Greg Godwin before, and I listened to one of his messages listened to it a few times. I'm doing some work with these. I'm not just listening to them, but that's one part of it, but I'm also doing some literary and rhetorical analysis just to understand how they're doing what they're doing and stuff, just because that's my training. And it's really interesting to find some cool stuff out when you break down how they work. And Greg Godwin's good. He's really very capable preacher. Tom Foster is another one. This is Sister Scott's old pastor, and I sat under him for a couple of years too. He's really, really good at ministering to the audience. And so anyway, I've been listening to them and some others too. And I don't even know if these two ministers that I just mentioned, I don't think they used Matthew 18 verse 18. I think this was some other preachers that I heard, because I can't remember them ever referring to this verse in their messages. So it must have been some others. But these ministers, whichever ones it was, because I listened to a bunch when I've been gone, a couple of different ones referred to Matthew 18 verse 18. And they threw around the phrases from that verse and used it in a way that, that's frankly not what the verse means. And it's just the phrases from the verse, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, whatever you loose on earth. Those phrases have become so common in a lot of evangelical and Pentecostal circles, and charismatic circles as well, because it really seems like it fits with our with a lot of evangelicals' concept of what we call spiritual warfare, where you've got evil spirits you're trying to do battle, and that's usually the context that's used in. And the binding part of the verse, it's supposedly, you're binding up evil spirits, or your sinful lusts or sinful habits. You're binding those things up and tying them up and restraining them and keeping them from having any impact, right? And loosing means, we love the word loose, and not only does it fit with that whole spiritual warfare idea, but it seems to tie in with our love for the notion of liberty and freedom, which we Americans just love those words because we've thrown them around, for a couple of centuries now. And so, just as the binding is about restraining sinful lusts and evil spirits, the loosing is about setting people free from evil and from sin. It's about breaking the bonds, and setting things free. Now, in this light, that would make binding an aggressive act done to an enemy, or an enemy force, or an enemy, so it's more of a negative thing, right? And that would also make loosing a benevolent act, a good act done for an ally or for some sort of positive force. So you bind up that evil and you set free that good. However, if you really care about what the words mean, and you look at the Greek, which is what the original text was was written in, that understanding, binding up evil things so they don't have any more power, loosing good things so they have freedom and can and be good and great and do what they want. That's backwards. It's kind of backwards. The word bind in Matthew 18, verse 18, comes from the Greek word deo. And it means to tie. Well, okay, Brother Scott, it still sounds like it's tying something up. It means to knit. Remember, I told you my title did connect to the verse, knitting in preparation for night. So to knit, to bind. So it still sounds like the same. To wind, like to put cordage around something. And if you look at those meanings of those words and how it's applied in the definition in the Greek dictionary, it doesn't mean you're tying down an enemy. It's more like binding up a wound, pulling the injured parts together so they can heal. Another example would be to secure the sails and items on a ship, to tie them down, to bind them in place in preparation for a storm so they don't get washed overboard or damaged or cause injury to someone. So it's about securing good things. It's about making sure you've got your good things in place and safe. It's about helping and repairing. So this bind is not about tying down evil. It's about ensuring that you keep the good, securing it, right? And on the opposite side, loosing comes from the Greek word, this is going to be funny, luo. Isn't that interesting how it seems like it might have a common root? It may. We know Greek influenced Latin, and a lot of our languages are influenced and came from Latin roots. So maybe there is a connection there. But the Greek word luo does mean to loosen. But now I want you to check out some other nuances of the meaning. To loosen, to break up, to dissolve, to destroy, to put off. So whenever, Jesus said, whatever you bind on earth, will be bound in heaven. He was saying, whatever things you secure, whatever things you knit to yourself, that you make sure you bind it to you so you can keep it, you'll still have those in heaven. And whatsoever things you loose or you break up or you dissolve or you put off, you're going to be getting rid of those, and you're not going to have to deal with them in heaven either. They're going to be gone. They're going to be carried away in the current. In fact, an examples of luo or loosening here would be like if a ship is taken on water and it's too heavy, to untie and release excess cargo into the ocean. Or if an airplane is losing altitude because it's too heavy, then you can open the side door, or if it's a cargo plane, you can lower that back door and slide some extra weight and things off and let go, luo them, loosen them so that the plane is lighter and can stay in the air. So notice that this is backwards. It's not about binding evil spirits so that they're tied up. It's about binding the good things to you so you can keep them. And it's not about loosing people that are tied down or angelic hosts that are tied up somehow, or good forces or whatever that are tied up so they can be free to reign. No. It's about letting things loose so that they're carried away and they're no longer weighing you down. Unloading your pack a little bit is what loosing means. Now I want you to think about why binding up an evil enemy. If you think about that in trying to make that old notion, that false, erroneous notion of binding fit, does it even make sense in that verse? I mean, is heaven really going to only tie up evil spirits if we do it first? That's what it would mean if that's what Jesus was trying to say. And are there any evil spirits running amok in heaven anyway? And somehow that spirit running evil in heaven is somehow, there's like a mirror image of him running around here on earth too. this is one of my favorite questions that I have found myself asking when I really start thinking about some of our words. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? And similarly, does that idea of loosing people that are bound up, or loosing angels that are bound up, or loosing whatever good spirits are bound up? I don't even know what supposedly we're bound up, but loosing something, setting free, does that make sense in the context of heaven? Is heaven a place where the good spirits are tied up unless we untie them? Is heaven a place where anybody's tied up, or anything good is tied up? I thought heaven was a place where there was nothing bad there at all. Again, my favorite question of the moment. What does that even mean? Yeah. So but it sounds so good, right? I mean, when you're really preaching and you're getting people excited about, victory and liberation, man, can it really, it just feels good. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on, you'll loose in heaven, and it just feels good. It sounds good. It's got a nice, poetic repetition to it. And it feels, it's rhetorically exciting to say, and it can really work to get an audience excited about what's going on. And I wonder if that's some of it. I think, like I mentioned, maybe we misinterpreted and just hung on to it, and we keep throwing it around, even though, I know years past I have looked at that verse. So it's not like this is a new thing that I knew the verse, didn't mean that. I mean, it's this information has been out there a while. And that's one of the reasons why it struck me when I heard a couple of different ministers in some of these sermons I've listened to use it that way. But the only thing I can figure is it's kind of become part of, our religious culture and jargon. So we throw it around a lot. It really fits with our American notion of freedom and liberty and setting people free. We love that imagery. We love that. We believe that to be an important part of our country, an important part of our past, which, by the way, you would think as much as we love the notion of setting people free, that we wouldn't have people who had a problem with this recent addition of a new holiday called Juneteenth, which was literally about the last enslaved Black people finding out 2 years after they were actually officially free. They finally found out they were actually free and got their freedom. So if you want to know more about that, it was in Texas. There was there's one place in Texas, I might have been South Texas, I'm thinking Galveston, I may be wrong about that, where 2 years after they were set free, the Civil War was over. 2 years after the fact, they had been emancipated. No one had told them, and they were still being enslaved. They found out the last officially enslaved people were free. That's a good thing in a country that's all about freedom and liberty. That seems like just a no-brainer for a good reason to have a holiday, right? It's the other bookend of what began on Independence Day in July the 4th, right? That was when people started being free from European tyranny, and finally the last people were no longer enslaved and free of slavery, which is another type of tyranny. So if we really love freedom, that seemed like a no-brainer. But anyway, maybe that's the reason why we love this idea of loosing and binding. We just, because we as Americans, it just fits. By the way, July the 4th is a week from tomorrow. I think there might be another reason why we keep hanging on to this misinterpretation, because I started noticing that in addition to that misinterpretation, misapplication of those words in that verse, I started noticing a lot of these sermons, not all of them, but a lot of them, there's a lot of symbolism, imagery, stories, language depicting or referring to battle, violence, aggression, us versus them. It seems to be very, very prolific in our preaching. And this misinterpretation of the verse would fit with that too. Let me just give you a little homework to do. Next time you're listening to a sermon, I want you to start counting how many words you hear that refer to some sort of antagonistic, aggressive action. Fight, battle, war, chains, swords, defeat, victory, destroy, imprison, invade, tear down, to silence, to break. I could keep going, folks. There's a lot of those type of words that get thrown around, and they tend to happen a whole lot, especially as the preacher is getting excited and getting the audience excited with him. He starts with all this fight terminology and us versus them, and the enemy can't bring us down. We're going to the enemy's camp, and greater is he that's even than he that is in the world. And some of these are Bible verses, but it's not all Bible verses. You're going to take back what the devil stole from me, and we're going to smash the strongholds. We're going to tear down the walls and storm the gates. And man, it's a lot of references to violence. It's constant. I find it. I found it. I started thinking it was a little bit ironic, because one of the things that I remember since I was young that ministers and churches have taken a stand against is all the violence in movies and media, and then of course later video games that came along. And it struck me as ironic and maybe a little bit hypocritical that for all those years we were so against those violent depictions, while meanwhile we lean so heavily on violent imagery and verbiage and symbolism in our very preaching and in our songs and hymns. Interesting, just something to think about. So I think that's very appealing and a very effective rhetorical tool, especially it's effective on American audiences who, once again, not only do we love the notion of freedom, we love the notion of setting people free. We love the notion of breaking chains. The problem with that is before you can set people free, you've got to believe in a pervasive sense of people being in chains and people being hurt. And so violence is kind of the flip side of that coin. You can't have one without the other. And let's face it, we are a country who loves to talk about how we won in wars. We are a country who loves to talk about fighting injustice. And, I said this a couple of weeks ago, or 3 or 4 weeks ago now. This is something I'd said a couple of years ago too. I'm tired of fighting. I don't think fighting does a whole lot except destroy stuff. I'm much more impressed with people who know how to build bridges, who know how to talk and converse and figure things out like adults. I didn't have to grow very old before I knew how to fight and knew how to argue, knew how to, push and pull and call names. I had mastered those skills by the time I was at elementary school. So next time, someone says they're going to fight for me, like I said a few weeks ago, they're not getting my vote for that. I want to hear them. I can go build bridges for you. I can go build for you. So we in America, we love the idea of fighting. We are a bickersome people. Maybe that's one reason we have hung on to that misinterpretation of that verse. But the real meaning of the verse is much more beautiful, much more beautiful. It's about taking inventory of the things in our lives that enrich us and the things in our life that are weighing us down, that are just cluttering things. Maybe they're things that used to be helpful and useful and they're not anymore. Maybe they've passed their expiration date, or they're just wore out, or they just don't need those anymore. So it's about taking inventory and the things that we're binding to us. They're not evil entities. We're binding to us the things that we find, these things really are precious. Maybe the people that are precious. Maybe those heirlooms that are precious. Maybe those things that left to us by our parents when they passed on. But it's about taking inventory and binding those things that are precious to us, things that we want to hold into. We're knitting them to us because they bring joy and love, and we want to keep them with us so we can keep having joy in them. The things we're losing, we're not losing entities or good people that are bound. No, we're letting go of weights, things that aren't doing anything for us except pulling us down, maybe getting in our way, maybe wasting our time and attention, maybe increasing our stress. We're letting go of those things. Imagine a dark night on the ship. and you can see that on the dark in the horizon, which you can't really make out the horizon because it's dark, but you can see it in flashes because a storm is coming. And when the blackness all of a sudden is bright for just a split second, all of a sudden you do see the horizon, and it's these billowing clouds. So imagine that's where you are right now. What things in your life give you comfort and warmth? You might want those with you. You might want those with you in this stormy night you're about to go through. What things help you navigate and better weather the weather? You might want those with you. What things help brighten up the night? Because the storm is going to be black except for those flashes of lightning. Whatever those things are, the things that help, the things that bring joy, the things that bring warmth and comfort, the things that make life better and more manageable. Right now, well, what you need to do is start working on knitting those things to you, securing those things, binding those things in place, make them more permanent in your life. Work on improving their longevity and taking care of those things in life. Do your tomorrow self a favor of making sure they'll still be there when your tomorrow self wakes up. What things in your life, now that we're on the ship and the storm's moving in, it's dark and it's going to be quite tempestuous in a bit. What things in your life cause you trouble and trip you up? What things add stress and divide your focus? What things are likely to be rolling and tossing about the deck? Remember, when the ship is pitching and it's all darkness, except for when the lightning flashes, you don't want clutter. You don't want things kind of bumping and rocking around. Loose those things. Toss them overboard. Toss them overboard. That's hard to do sometimes. I know one of the hardest things for my grandma to deal with whenever we had to move her from Louisiana up to Maine was all the stuff she had and letting go of it. And as we age and live in one place, our houses and our rooms and our closets and our garages and our buildings can get more and more full. And it's easy. You don't even have to think about it. It just, people give you things, you come home with things, you see something you thought you could use, and it gets more and more full. It's hard sometimes to let go. But a lot of that stuff my grandma had, she wasn't using it anymore. She couldn't. She physically could not. There were some things she probably quit using because they looked like they might be useful, but she really didn't use them. Other things she had gotten too advanced in years. I mean, grandma lived by herself for a good part of her life, and she loved being a do-it-yourselfer. And she had quite a few little power tools, but in her condition where she couldn't, she was falling and stuff. I mean, there was no way she should ever be near a power tool again, right? So, it was hard for her. It's hard for her, but that's what she needed to do, because all of that stuff out there wasn't doing anything for her. In fact, it was causing her stress. It was causing her worry. The older she get, the more vulnerable she got, the more likely someone would start coming around looking at stuff and steal it. And it was aging, and she had to make sure it was out of the weather in her buildings, which she couldn't fix anymore, that they weren't becoming leaky and old and allowing all her precious stuff to be spoiled. It's just, we've got to, a part of life, a part of being successful at managing life is learning what's really important and really precious and holding on to it. And being honest about what you really don't use or need anymore. Maybe even the people who aren't so good for you anymore. And not feeling like you have to hold on to that or them either. Take stock of those things and those people who are going to help you with this storm. Hold on to them. Take stock of those things and those people who probably aren't really going to. And just, I'm not saying to just throw them away, but don't be grasping for them and reaching for them and in the middle of the storm. You don't want that extra complication and anguish and pain of rejection and problem and bickering. You can't afford it when the storm is here, when it's nighttime. So I know it's hard, but take stock. Bind those precious things to you. Lose those other things. Just let them go wherever they may go. And you'll be okay, and you'll get through this, and you'll come through, and you'll be in better shape when the sun comes up in the morning. Well, I love you, folks. Can't wait to see you next Sunday. Have a wonderful day. I heard that in the county a couple of days ago, it got down to the 30s again at night. Hopefully you find some days where it's actually going to seem like summer and you can enjoy it. It's been warmer where I am, obviously. The further south you go, you have more sunshine. But it had been real hot, mostly here either. A couple of days it was kind of warm. But anyway, take care of yourself. I love you, and we will see you in a few days. Bye.